Consider stealing for a moment. I think every religion, well, I'm not sure, but the major religions seem to definitely say thou shalt not steal. It's a good principle not to steal. That which belongs to someone else should stay with them. Why? Well, what's the foundation of this principle? It observes what another wants. There's something non-selfish about it. I'm not putting myself before someone else, giving me priority. I've argued before that, property rights are very important in society because we're not motivated to create and do things unless we get the benefit. In other words, creativity comes to an end, work comes to an end. If I know that the obvious, if I work and earn money, buy things, I lose them immediately because people steal them off me. There's no point in working. So civilization comes to an end. And of course the manner in which they steal may well be violent. So that not stealing seems to be the bedrock of society. But the reason for not stealing is because there's what I'm attempting at the minute to say, a higher principle, which is not to be selfish. Not to be putting yourself before others. What happens if others are putting themselves before you? What's the defense? I come and take what you feel is not mine. You feel it's yours. When will you feel that? Well, simply because you have possession of it. You don't wish to lose it. But sometimes you should lose it. You have amassed incredible wealth, and the other man is in poverty and distress. Oh, well, then we have a principle, you should help. Good. What happens if you don't? And the poor man steals from you. Now, when I say steal, of course, I immediately infer that he's wrong to do it, because I'm saying that the wealth is yours. And so we have an inconsistency here, because we were arguing that in some sense, yes, the wealth is something you've amassed, but you should be giving it away and you're not. So he puts that right by taking it. Now, we're clear that it's rather more right when it's a Robin Hood thing. He takes it from such a person and gives it to the poor. And clearly the poor love him for it. The wealthy don't, of course. And they use their power to stop him doing it, of course. You see, we have to stand back from the situation and say the distribution of goodies should be fairer, should be more equal. We don't want want the rich man to be impoverished, but we certainly don't want all the poor to remain impoverished. So we have some notion, don't we, that the rich man should, of his own free will, give. And if he does, well, first of all, he'll be loved. And secondly, he'll still be probably a lot better off than the poor. That's the ideal. I'm not sure how much he should give away. Should it be equal? Or should it be down to what he needs and the rest is given away? What is really wrong with stealing? Well, when you take it from a poor man, when the person who takes benefits a bit more, but the person who had little anyway gets less. We do this much in society, much of the time. The poor people are giving money to just survive, and the rich people are getting great surplus. That's okay if the rich people then help the poor. You see, it depends on circumstance. If, for instance, I'm very rich and I've got it through crime, in what sense is that wealth mine? I don't have it legitimately. And it's right, we feel, if the state come and take it away. Should they give the wealth back to the person who'd stolen it before you, that you stole off of? No. Ideally, we would want them to give it to the poor to help bring them up wherever needed. Perhaps more ideally, you might have in mind you create jobs and production of things that are useful, and the whole of society benefits. Well, the poor now have work, which brings in a reasonable income, so that they're no longer poor, and they're producing goods for the society that needs the goods. Not to make the rich richer, except in as far as making the rich richer, at least to some extent, is helped by the rich being willing to give away. The fault is that we focus on what is wrong instead of what is right, best, wanted, ideal. And ideally speaking, we want less poverty in total. But in a selfish world, this means that industriousness is discouraged by not having the benefit of being the one that's productive. What's the ideal benefit? An infinite amount? Oh no, that would be nonsense. That which comes of the situation. Depends what the situation is. You know, I mean, when I had TB, it was at a time when some not too long time earlier, someone in the world had cornered the market for penicillin. And reducing the supply and pushing the price up. They had a monopoly, didn't they? And society definitely felt, well, this monopoly is very harmful, not good. Should he continue doing what he's doing? No. Did the state make some sort of effort to stop this? Apparently they did. Now, I don't know the details of it, and perhaps one could track it down historically. How true this situation was, I don't know, but I assume it was. And I think most of us would feel, oh, this was bad. Would it be right then if someone independently came along and stole it from him? The benefits. Or stole the supply of penicillin. Broke his monopoly. No, it would be right. Right in the sense that we had some notion of what the ideal is. And the ideal is that he's not selfish. If that ideal is not present, are we allowed to break it? Well, society as a whole may well choose to do so. Is society right to do so? Well, we tend to think yes, and when I say we, I mean society. And perhaps any other society looking on thinks this is so too. In other words, the fact that you have the incentive to get rich doesn't mean you should have the freedom to do so. And if you do, well, it's okay if you then give away. But in fact, in this case, it wouldn't be, would it? I get rich by cornering the market for some essential medicine and then give the money simply away to the poor. Not ideal. Would have been more ideal if, of course, we'd had a better production of the medicine that was necessary, and people were rescued from their great deprivation of a severe illness. So it's best to take away this available incentive to be selfish, because it results in some people being tragically left to die, suffer and die. Is it right to impose this where it's not going to come about if we don't do something about it? We think it is, especially if the state does it, assuming the state does it properly, well. If you like, takes over the production or breaks up the market so that it's more competitive. And we tend to favour that second one because we know there's something wrong in our society. What's actually wrong is this selfish drive that will keep yourself affluent when others are in desperate poverty. Quite simply, we think that a more equitable distribution of resources would be better. We're concerned it might be not so good for production. And in a world of selfishness, we do have to leave the individual to gain from production, or he won't do it. we don't want a world where we're forcing him to do it, and then distribute the resources accordingly, because his selfishness can undermine your ability to do this. And we think that may have been what really is at fault with the imposed communist system, that basically the workers stop working efficiently and society grinds to a halt. We're not clear that's true. Dissolution of for instance, the Soviet Union may well have been competitive warmongering of the nations of the world, impoverishing the economies of those that can't keep up in the arms race. The problem at root is not taking from those that shouldn't have it and giving it to those that do. The problem in the world is selfishness. Given man is selfish, a simple rule of not stealing and being imposed, not taking, works tolerably well, and society puts it right where that's abused, where your possession is not considered to be your right to hold, as where you've gone and taken it off someone else. So society comes to the rescue by imposing "thou shalt not steal and we'll punish you if you do," but leaves the inequality problem. And it's that, leaving the inequality problem, that seems to be the problem. If I intervene and redistribute wealth or income or resources, given the population is basically selfish, they may all sit at home, nothing's produced, and we're all in ruin. So we don't redistribute much at all. But in a market economy, that results in, if you like, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. It's no coincidence, is it, that the countries that have the least concern for welfare of others, as where family structure is down to the nuclear family or even less, the one-parent family, or even no-parent family, those societies are materialistically extremely successful, perhaps quite a high wastage of the poor. They die off. Whereas societies that are very poor have a very good family structure. Within the family, they are very concerned and helpful to each other at least. So there's this correspondence going on. A large population in poverty, or a very small population in great wealth, who can use this wealth to dominate those that don't have it, of course. If that's their own people, the poor just die off. They get a higher rate of malnutrition illness and disease and so on. And the rich get richer. The society appears to prosper. That's because you're looking at those that survived. Whereas in the poorer country, many survive, but there's great poverty. This unfortunate situation seems to be heightened by the presence also in such poor societies of some who are incredibly rich. So someone like Marx comes up with the obvious, which is, well, we need a society in which from each according to his ability, but to each according to their need. It's just that selfish man doesn't value that sort of society. Only the saints. And you do not have a population of saints. And you don't know how to achieve it. And you can't achieve it. Because sainthood is something that's of the individual, not imposition. If I impose a mode of behavior that treats everyone as equally important, I end up with no society at all, because each individual is acting as though that's irrelevant. Their own welfare is what counts. Well, given this is the case, society therefore says thou shalt not steal, and defines what property rights are going to be enforced. And we could say that where they draw that line depends on the power structure within that society. It's more or less understood that in our societies, possession is 9/10 of the law. And we may feel that society ideally should be drawing the line slightly more in the poor's favour. But we're not at all clear what would be best way of doing that isn't disastrous. In that, yes, we do have a large population, but they're in desperate poverty. We have it. You can't make a box of good apples from a box of bad apples. This is not simply one bad apple makes the others bad. But if they're all bad, you cannot simply come along and find an ethical morality principle that will make all the apples good. They're rotten. That's all there is to it. What you can say is, it's very good if the individual who is wealthy is just as industrious, in fact more so, when he cares about the poor. If he doesn't care about the poor, imposing it on him is likely just to cause trouble, not blessing. You may say, well, trouble at some cost in the short run, but benefit to the others whom it helps? And the reply is yes, well, it helps them in the short run, but they now sit at home and work less, and society grinds to a halt. So then we say laissez-faire, leave alone where you can, is the best option. Accept the fact that your society is made up of very selfish individuals. If you impose the solution on them, you have a disaster. You could encourage the solution, but that would be where you encourage the rich to be more generous. Does that work overall? No, it doesn't. Maharajas in India were encouraged to be generous, and they were, but nothing like enough to really make a difference to the poor. And the rich seem to just get richer. The poor, wow, eternally vanishing. The fault is not that we don't intervene and redistribute wealth. The fault is that we don't intervene and encourage people to be kinder. Because if they're kinder, they get a benefit from giving. And this does not discourage them from being so productive. Of course, if they're kinder, they will avoid certain means of getting more productive or amassing wealth. Wealth actually does it at the cost of the poor. They will start to find rather repellent. So, the type of productivity may shift. That's ideal, but to impose it seems to be disastrous. Right. Hence, when we look at, as far as we can see, broadly speaking, every attempt at communism fails. Why? Because some leader gets to the top who's extremely selfish, of course. And it becomes a tyranny instead of a blessing. Very quickly. Oh. Thank you, Dad. So yes, we find the major religions at least all follow the principle. Not stealing. Despite the fact that the selfishness in societies results in great unhappiness. But quite simply, it's not to focus on what's wrong, but whatsoever's right, good and lovely. When we think on these things, we want to encourage these things. And therein lies the answer. We encourage our kids to be kind and industrious. Thank you, Dad. We find, don't we, that not imposing the rule of thou shalt not steal, if you like, is disastrous for civilization. So we cannot follow that. We can't just let people redistribute as they individually want to do, because individually they're selfish. And It'll be absolutely the collapse of civilization if we do that. So for civilization to exist, it has to impose a non-stealing approach. But it needs to encourage a non-selfish approach, because that's the thing that's really the problem. Now, you know, the Adam Smith understanding of things is that people all acting selfishly results in, you know, pins being made. And they're not made otherwise. In a world of selfish people, that's true. What we want is a world of non-selfish people. But we can't achieve that by force. We have to look to other means. Encouraging benevolence, encouraging concern for others. I mean, obviously the poor are not going to love the wealthy for their selfishness, but will love them for their generosity. And of course, as you get richer, more riches are rather less important than being thought well of. Of course, there's a potential corruption here that I might use my wealth to be thought well of, but still be incredibly selfish, which was the problem, of course, of the Caesars. They would use their wealth, Roman society, to fund the games and celebrations and give the Roman citizen free bread. But of course they were doing it to put themselves in such a position of power that they could be incredibly privileged compared to the rest of the population. But the problem, of course, was quite simply that they weren't genuinely concerned about the poor at all, but their own amassing of power and wealth. So we try to look for a political system that will avoid such Caesars coming to power. We don't know what system helps towards that goal the most. In the West, we suspect that democracy may, but the jury's still out. And we have a sort of relative problem lurking as well, which is, what is poverty? The poor in Western societies live far better than the poor in what we used to call third world societies. But it's not clear they're happier. Oh. Perhaps my goal is not specifically then to avoid poverty, but to achieve a better level of happiness, or even distribution of happiness. But then we find that the rich aren't particularly much happier either, despite a very high level of consumption and ownership. Oh, we've been barking up the wrong tree then. Yes, that's what spirituality is about. What should we be prioritizing? And of course there's all sorts of spiritual suggestions here. Thank you, Dad. What does this mean then, as regards the person who's spiritually motivated, well, he knows that the worldly solution of imposition and so on is not really the right answer at all. The spiritual answer is people becoming more spiritual, more loving and kind, more concerned about each other. We want a world in which there is fellowship. Ah, you want heaven? Yes. Right. What's the way of achieving it? Well, it's not by imposition. Oh. Is imposition always wrong? Well, depends. From an enlightened person, no. To his children that he loves and cares for, no, some imposition is protective and rescuing and provision. I see.